The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Now broadcasting from the Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, art, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report Live with Sam Whitfield.
But giving offense is good. In fact, it's essential.
Alrighty, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, recording here at Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida for the Whitfield Report. And yes, it is still sunny in Florida, mostly, even though it's November. But anyway, very glad to be here with you this Monday evening, or maybe it's Tuesday by the time you guys are listening to this episode. But anyway, very happy to be here. And, for those watching on the video version of the show, I do have a cool background now with the Whitfield Report logo. So I hope you guys enjoy that. And we've got a jam-packed show for you today or whenever you're listening to this. So let's get right into it. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to jump into it. By now, most of you all have seen the major amount of freak out videos on Twitter and on Instagram and TikTok and God knows where else, you've seen them, of all the liberals and all the left snowflakes flipping out over Trump's, election on, last Tuesday night. What's funny is they did this in 2016, the first time he ran, and won. And back then, I'll admit, it was, even for me, I think even all of Trump supporters back in 2016 were, surprised that he won. So it was kind of like a freak, it was kind of like they were freaking out. We were kind of freaking out, but in the opposite, sense, where we were just ecstatic that he won. This time, it wasn't so surprising just because Kamala was an absolutely horrible, candidate. She really didn't have any, ground game whatsoever that was really motivating. She was really weak on policy, and she just, ultimately what it was is she just wasn't personable at all, really. And as Max and I talked about on last week's Wednesday show, she ran on, the most divisive issue, which is basically abortion rights. And that was her singular topic. And no candidate, whether it be on the right or the left, and whether it be, for abortion rights or against that, or against abortion rights, no candidate has ever ran on that platform successfully as their main talking point on either platform, or on either side, I should say. Excuse me. So, Kamala ran on a very divisive platform just to begin with. Second, I think the other thing that was like just really apparent towards the end of the election was she literally could not, really answer any questions or really do any long form interviews. When she first took over for Biden, when he dropped out of the campaign, which by the way, it seems kind of like he was forced out to anyone paying attention. He was forced out by the DNC after, his disastrous debate with Trump. Kamala, she hid from doing any interviews or putting out any policy to begin with, and that was a major problem for her. And then she really, the media had to kind of like, bait her into doing a kind of like a confrontational interview with, Brett Baier in enemy territory, so to speak, right, with Fox News. And like Brett Baier is not like, Fox is conservative, but like Brett Baier is not like Tucker Carlson or Rush Limbaugh, or anything like that. He's a Fox News guy, kind of like fairly middle of the road, I would say. And she couldn't even do that, interview for very long. As Max and I talked about, on the show, like probably about a month or so ago, she only lasted for about like 25 minutes before they cut her off and she tapped out, and it was really bad for her. And then I think really the ultimate coup de grace was she refused to go on Joe Rogan's podcast even after Rogan invited her on and had done a 3-hour interview with Donald Trump. Now, granted, a 3-hour interview for people can be a lot. I admit that as someone who does 3-hour interviews with guests pretty regularly. But, that's the format of the show. And one of my friends made a point about, Kamala not doing Rogan that I find, pretty compelling, actually. Which is that if Kamala couldn't even do 3 hours with, Rogan, where it wasn't even supposed to be a political interview, it was more of like a getting to know you interview, and she couldn't even do that. And to a lot of people, myself included, and even a lot of like, more moderates, it's kind of like, well, gee, if she can't have a simple conversation on Rogan and be genuine for more than like 20 or 30 minutes, then how is she going to do on the world stage when she's facing off against, Ahmadinejad or Vladimir Putin or some, country where the leaders are hostile and, you're going to be in intense, negotiations or communications with them, sometimes for hours on end. If she can't even do Joe Rogan, then how is she going to do on the world stage? So there was all of that, plus the fact that she really can't string a sentence together. She has no policy, all of that, and yet people were absolutely shocked that Trump won, and won in a landslide. Now, I'll admit, I had my concerns that, like, the Dems were going to steal this thing. Like, that was my main concern leading up to the election. And I think that was a lot of people's concern. But, basically, Trump won in a landslide, and he won in such a way that it was too big to, it was too big to rig, basically. And so, Trump won, and hence all the salty tears from the left, and like I said, some of some of the compilations of the meltdowns are hilarious. And deserve to be laughed at. With that being said, some of the freakouts, and these are mostly from women, admittedly, some of them are funny, but also simultaneously some of them are very sad. And it's sad because a lot of these young women who are, going on Instagram or going on TikTok and just screaming at the top of their lungs, crying and wailing. Ladies and gentlemen, these women legitimately think that, Trump is going to take away their, rights as a woman, and that they're going to be in, some modern day version of the Handmaid's Tale. Right, that whole meme has popped up again. What they don't understand is that when Roe v. Wade was repealed by the Supreme Court, it didn't get rid of abortion altogether. It didn't outright ban abortion. It simply gave the issue of abortion back to the states, which is something that, many legal scholars, and even, I think, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in hindsight should have happened. Abortion always should have been a states' rights issue. Even a lot of, liberal legal scholars say that. But a lot of these women who are on TikTok and Instagram and everything else, and there are a lot of men who are like this, to be fair too, they don't even know to really research that at all. They don't know very basic things like that. And so they go on, TikTok or Instagram and wherever and post these freak out videos. And it is honestly legitimately sad that they've been so conditioned by the corporate media and by the left and by academia to hate Trump so much that they're literally in fear of their own lives. I mean, like I said, there is an element of humor to it, I guess, how ridiculous it is, but it is also sad at the same time. And I actually feel bad for them. Because, see, the left doesn't actually care about women. They just want votes. And that's it. I think that the Dems knew that Kamala wasn't, a capable candidate. Because they've had DEI and wokeism as their main platform for the last several years. And because Biden appointed her as VP, they knew they were kind of stuck with her. Because Kamala didn't have a platform of her own, really, what did they have to do? They had to go back to fearmonger. And as a result, who suffered most? Their own supporters. And like I said, it really is sad, ladies and gentlemen. It is. Now, in addition to this, the other thing that's been really bizarre for me in the past week, and this is kind of on a personal note, but let me just, I guess, start off by saying this, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it or not, I'm not someone who, in my personal life, really gets political at all. And I know that may seem like a shock to some of you. But, honestly, as I've gotten older, I've gotten less political, so to speak, in the sense that I don't talk politics all that much in my day-to-day life with people anymore. Now, there are people who will find out about the podcast and they'll know that I cover politics on the show. And so that may start a conversation. But even then, folks, I don't really like talk politics regularly or as frequently even on the podcast as I used to, right? It is true that the show like started off as a political, commentary podcast, but like I've diversified the show, and so now it's more of like a general interest slash like society and culture podcast. That's what I have it categorized under on all the platform, right? And so I'm actually like the least political that I've been for the most part, in terms of discussing politics with people. And I really don't like engage with people politically, on my personal social media accounts unless they engage with me first. Twitter and Instagram are kind of like an exception to that because, that's where I promote the show and post clips and post clips. So obviously that's an exception. But all of that is to say, folks, that I really don't go around like starting political discussions with people if they're not interested in it. Right? So like I rarely go on Facebook, anyway to begin with on my personal account. When I do, it's mainly just to see like status updates on what family members are doing, stuff like that. I rarely comment, or if I do, it's mainly just like a hello or something. That's kind of my standing operating procedure these days. I really don't bother anyone, with politics unless they engage with me first, in a good faith conversation. Then that's different. And yet, on Tuesday night and in the following days after the election, ladies and gentlemen, I had classmates who I went to high school with, classmates who I went to college with, family members, even a few people who I thought were, friends or good acquaintances. I saw several of these people who I thought were rational human beings. A lot of them were just screaming and melting down, and they were basically hysterical over, Trump's victory. And it was kind of like shocking to see for some of them because up until that point, I thought a lot of them were like rational, people who had better control of their emotions and weren't so, easily worked up by political stuff. Some of these people are even like, doctors or lawyers in some cases, or they have law degrees or doctoral degrees. Point being is, like, from an academic perspective, they've done better academically than I have. But as I've really come to realize over the last few years, just because you're good, just because you're exceptional in the academic field, so to speak, and know how to take a test real well or write essays real well, it doesn't mean that your critical thinking and reasoning skills are all that good. And, like, I'll admit, I think sometimes one of my flaws is because I'm always having deep conversations with, people on the podcast, and because I'm always having, like, deep discussions and interacting with people who do think critically, even if they're on the opposing side. And because I am interacting with some, rational people, I do think that I tend to sometimes forget that not everyone is like me. And, that's something that, like, I've definitely become more aware of since Tuesday. Understand, I'm not necessarily saying that, like, these people are stupid. Like I said, some of them are very smart people, but they lack critical thinking and reasoning, or really the ability to control their emotions, because they've just been so, conditioned by the media. And it is sad, ladies and gentlemen, because this happened in 2016, but it also happened in it happened last week, basically. I mean, I had people direct messaging me saying, in tears, screaming at me in all caps, "How could you do this to the country, Sam?" Or some were just sending me crying emojis. Again, these are people who, some of whom I haven't interacted with in years. They never reach out to say hello, some of them, or anything like that. But, they decide to reach out just to, say that, their association with me is over because I voted for the Orange Man. Okay, well, that's disappointing, and that's kind of sad, but also at the same time, for a lot of these people, I haven't spoken to them in years, so it's sad, but whatever. It's sad and it's bizarre, in a lot of cases. But then you also do have close relatives who, and this happened to me after I voted for Trump in 2016. I had relatives who I thought I was close to, and friends who I was close to, either disown me or cut off contact with me completely because I voted for Trump, and their mass hysteria got the best of them, which is sad and it's tragic. That's their choice, I guess. And I'm sharing this because I know a lot of Trump supporters who are also decent people who have experienced the same thing over the last couple days. And it really is sad and it really is baffling. And, like I said, it's one thing to laugh at these people, but also I feel bad for them. I pity for them, and believe it or not, I do pray for them too. But that is, ladies and gentlemen, why I've been so against the woke mind virus from the beginning. Because it divides friendships and it's torn apart families. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you could say on the flip side, well, Sam, aren't you an election denier about the 2020 election, and don't you think the 2020 election was stolen? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I do think that that there are fishy things about the 2020 election. And, I was disappointed about, the 2020 election. The big difference is I didn't cut off family members who disagreed with me about the election. I didn't cut off Biden supporters. I didn't even go in their, comments, really. I didn't really express, an opinion, even, on election night in 2020, or even in 2024. I didn't post a status on Facebook, because as soon as I saw that it was really hyperbolic, I just knew that man, it's just not, it's not really worth it, for family and, friendships and whatnot. And that's ultimately what it is. That's partially why I don't talk politics all that much on the show anymore. Because politics, unless there's something major going on, the election, that I feel I need to talk about, I feel just covering the day-to-day minutia can be a major time sucker, right? And it can just get monotonous and whatnot. And but then, like I said, I don't want the show to particularly be totally divisive. So I do try and like diversify topics and, invite guests, invite authors on, invite, some celebrities who I've had on, etc. So I'm not someone who necessarily like shoves my political beliefs in other people's faces, but I also don't hide from my political views either. I'm a proud conservative libertarian. Um, always have been. I'm conservative on some issues. I'm more libertarian on other issues. That's the way I've always been. I haven't changed uh, at all. I haven't really changed my political views since I started the show. Some of them I have as I've gotten older because I started this when I was so young. But like by and large, I've always been the same like reasonable guy. At least I try to be reasonable that I've always been. But the left has just gone so far, to the left that it makes me, who is like more of like a well-adjusted moderate conservative, seem like a total whack job. Or I'm not. And I'm not. I've actually like debunked a lot more of the far right wing, people in the last few years than I even have gone after the left. But, that's just the way the left rolls now, I guess. And it really is sad, man. It really is. I pray for these people. And with that being said, I think a good way of to kind of wrap up the show, just hear a female perspective on, some of these meltdowns. Would be to play a clip from, one of the fellow hosts at Right to Offend Media and, a frequent guest on the Whitfield Report. And, she makes cameos on the show. You know her, you love her, Maxine Sand, one of the hosts of The Sandwich Makers. Now, before I play this clip, I do want to give a little bit of background. So, as most of the regulars know, Maxine is the wife of my Wednesday night co-host, Max Sand, who, Max co-hosts and produces a lot of the shows on Right to Offend Media. She and her friend, Penn, they have a great podcast on, Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, The Sandwich Makers, which is great. Go check it out. It's fantastic. And Maxine, like in Penn, the whole point of the Sandwich Makers broadcast is they're just married women who they don't talk about politics or current events or anything like that. They just talk about what they're interested in. They don't really bring up like serious topics. It's just a fun like conversation among girlfriends. And more often than not, it's the top rated show on the network. Well, this past Saturday, Maxine and Penn were doing Reddit stories on their show, and the episode was great, but Maxine decided to go a little extra long, which sometimes happens. And so they ended the show and they kind of did like an after show with just Maxine, and Maxine invited Apex and myself, and we were talking about various things, kind of during the after show. And, although the Sandwich Makers don't really get political, like, the after show, anything goes. And Maxine, I hadn't talked to her, like, personally since the election. So I think it was either Apex or I asked her what her thoughts on the election is, and kind of like all these, liberal freakouts. And, this was essentially her response here, so I'm going to cue this up here because I think, if anyone can speak to the, liberal women freaking out, and if anyone, can address them directly, I think it's another woman. And Maxine's take is really good. So, really, I advise you to take a listen to this. It's fantastic. This is a clip from the Sandwich Makers. Go and check them out. Clip number 1. Let's go. All right. Well, thank you for, like I said when I was on there, that rant was awesome. And, like I said, Maxine is a sweetheart. We love her. She doesn't go off very often like that. But, she's absolutely right, ladies and gentlemen. The left really has brainwashed a lot of these women. And, a lot of liberal men, too. What I mean, she's just right on so many levels. The fact that women in other countries are basically treated not even like second class citizens. In like a lot of Middle Eastern countries, women are basically like slaves, property. And that's one thing that the feminist movement in America almost never wants to, point out here. Or if they do, it's usually like, well, that's just a difference of opinion, or that's just like cultural differences. That's what that is. Which that's a bizarre double standard. But anyway, I couldn't have said it better myself, folks. And if you're a conservative who knows liberals who are like this, who are friends or coworkers or family members, I know it can be tough if you have family members or close friends who are like this. And if those family or friend members, have cut you off, like, I know that sucks. I get it. I've been through that myself, and it's not fun at all. But, I would encourage you to have empathy for them and to, heck, I really don't, I don't like to pity people, but I do pity these people who are just so brainwashed into the liberal dogma that that they'll cut off, their relationships with people just because of a difference of politics. So like, I guess, you can pity them, but also pray for them. If you believe in that, and if they cut you off, there's not much you can do about that, but don't hate them for it. Just try and be as compassionate as you can be, and hopefully they'll come back to you and whatnot. I know it's tough, but let's be better than that, than the left. So that's kind of my message for today's podcast. I hope you all enjoyed. I know Monday's podcast is usually like a political show, but some days it is. We don't have a guest this week, obviously, but we will next week, hopefully, and I will probably announce that on either Wednesday or I might just drop the episode, when we do it, and then that'll be that. But we will have more guests coming before the end of the year, folks. Lots to cover on the future of the podcast, and lots to celebrate here on the podcast as well. So thanks to everyone who tuned in. Thanks to everyone who has supported my books. And by the way, before I forget, ladies and gentlemen, my new upcoming short story collection, Blood Ties Volume 1, will be officially available tomorrow, November 12th, in both paperback and hardcover editions. This is my Mafia short story collection. So thanks to everyone who has pre-ordered, and these will be available tomorrow. And I hope you all enjoy them. And to everyone who has been a beta reader, thank you for your support. And thanks also to Luke Goddich for his kind words and, the blurb he gave me. Very generous, and I can't wait for everyone to read the book. So until Wednesday, I'll see you all later, and God bless, God save this great nation, God, freedom, democracy, in that order, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Whitfield Report.
The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Thank you for watching the Whitfield Report live on the Right to Offend Media Network. Make sure to check out Sam's books on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. You can follow Sam on X at SamW_NGC and the Right to Offend Media Network at RTO Media. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And until next time, God bless, God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy, in that order.